It's 2015 and an FBI agent named Daniela Greene has decided to turn her back on the US. Her mission was to seduce the IS fighter and former rapper Dennis Cuthbert and lure him out of Syria, but in a strange twist of fate, she had been seduced by Cuthbert and was fleeing to Syria to become his bride. Dennis Cuthbert was born in Berlin, Germany. He was the son of a German mother and a Ghanaian father who would be deported before he was born. Over time, his mother found a new man who happened to be a US Army officer. Cuthbert and his new stepfather would not be the best of friends. In an interview with ex-Berliner, he revealed that his stepfather would brutally beat him. He described these beatings as really hard, with a belt and stuff, with grits and rice-a-roni. I had a tough time. During these difficult times, hip-hop was his saving grace. In the same interview, he describes his first experience of hip-hop. It was like, boom, in my head, niggas for life, niggas with attitude. During his teenage years, he became a member of the gang 36 Boys and got involved in drugs. He also decided to start a rapping career and released 3 albums between the years of 2006 and 2009. He was no longer Dennis Cuthbert, he was known as Dezo Dog. He didn't reach nationwide success, but was relatively well known in the Berlin area. It became immediately apparent that Tupac was a huge influence, with song titles like translations of All Eyes on Me in German and Mein Ambition as Rider, which pretty much My Ambition as a Rider. His second favorite rapper was DMX, an artist he even got to perform alongside. His career in entertainment started to grow, until a moment in 2009, he vanished. Dezo Dog was almost killed in a car crash, an event which would change him forever. He sought more meaning in his life, and would convert to Islam. Dezo Dog started attending a mosque in Neukölln. In what seemed like a very short span of time, he had achieved a new spiritual awakening. He incorporated this into his music, and while being a Muslim rapper isn't anything out of the ordinary even in the States, his lyrics started to become a lot more dark and violent. Then came the penultimate moment. In a tearful YouTube video, he announced that he now viewed music as haram, or forbidden, and was giving it up. He was no longer Dezo Dog anymore. He was Abu Malik. But this is where the first warning signs began to emerge. His local imam, Abdul Adim Qamus, had warned him that converting to Islam on his own had its dangers. In an interview with DW, Qamus said, I told him that someone who is new to Islam has to be careful what direction they go in. With young people who come to me, I'm often afraid that they can become radicalized on the internet. Qamus soon realized that after a month, Dennis was no longer attending his lessons. He got word that he was involved in the Salafi scene of Islam, which was a lot more fundamental. He heard him singing jihadist songs on YouTube and decided to give him a call. On the phone, he said, "What are you doing? This is the wrong way." And he said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not like that." Then after that, he changed his numbers, and since then, I have not had any contact with him. Qamus' best way of explaining this radicalization was as a code of Islam. I think what Cuthbert had was a past, and he just put on a coat of Islam. He might have that coat on, but certain parts of his character stayed firmly in his roots. So, radicalism was like a gang, but with more of a religious and righteous veneer to him. Abu Malik's views were completely at odds with the majority of people in Berlin. So in 2011, he took a one-way flight from Berlin to Cairo, Egypt. It was in Egypt that he joined an Al-Qaeda affiliated organization. He traveled to the Egyptian city of Mersa Matruh, where he received military training. He also received further training in Darna in Libya. He was now fully qualified as a soldier for his cause. And if this wasn't confusing enough, he was no longer called Abu Malik. He was now Abu Talha al-Almani, meaning Abu Talha the German. In 2012, he realized that Egypt was not where the true revolution was happening. The place where he could live under his vision of an Islamic caliphate was further east in Syria. He fought for Junud al-Sham, who alongside other groups were trying to overthrow the Syrian government and take advantage of the uprising that was happening there. There was a vacuum of power during this time, and these groups planned on filling the power vacuum now available in Syria and Iraq. During a formative battle against the Syrian Air Force, he was entrapped in a home, and shelling from the other side caused a brutal head injury. Abu Talha al-Almani was in a coma for an entire week. He posted in an online interview, My head was open and some parts of my brain were coming out. The brothers cared about me a lot, and through the mercy of Allah, I woke up. And in the summer of 2014, these groups took the whole world by surprise. They conquered huge swaths of territory in northern Iraq and established an Islamic State. Members of Junud al-Sham gradually defected to IS. This stretched from Aleppo to Syria to Diyala in Iraq. At their peak, they had conquered land the size of Great Britain. With IS' newfound control, they were a force to be reckoned with. With al-Almani, they had a brilliant spokesperson to appeal to the young men they wanted to recruit. He was a charismatic rapper who came up under DMX music. He could speak English, German, and Arabic. He was their key representative for the German-speaking world of Germany, Austria, and parts of Switzerland. In July 2014, he presented a video of himself alongside a pile of corpses who IS had slain during their conquest. In November 2014, he was holding the head of a victim and said, "They were opponents of IS. That is why they have received the death sentence." He was using the same bravado and flexes that he learned making gangsta rap videos as if he was flexing some jewelry or cars. On his newfound platform, he made threats towards Barack Obama and the people of Germany, and he also encouraged people to conduct their own attacks. All of the information I've given you so far was more likely briefed to a woman named Daniela Greene. She was an American woman who grew up in Germany, so she spoke fluent German, and she was given top security clearance from the FBI and was told to communicate with al-Almani over Skype. Her job was to convince al-Almani that she wanted to be his bride. She would then agree to meet him in Turkey so they could move across the border in Syria. The FBI would then ambush him while he was on Turkish soil. They spoke back and forth over Skype. Greene had initially pretended to be smitten by al-Almani and gave the impression that she was interested in joining his cause. Over time, though, she had to put less work on this act. Eventually, it was no longer an act. She was genuinely head over heels for al-Almani. Then one day, al-Almani received a Skype message from a different account. It was Daniela. She came clean and told him that she really loved him and wanted to be his bride. Greene told her employers that she was going on vacation to Germany to see some relatives. In reality, she was getting a one-way ticket to Turkey and was going to meet al-Almani to take her over to Syria on her own. The fact that al-Almani had the ability to seduce Greene and make a non-Muslim top security FBI agent turn against him was the ultimate humiliation for the country. Not only that, but it gave him more credentials than anyone else on YouTube to be teaching people how to spit some game. Greene met with al-Almani and they traveled to Syria. She had been sold a dream of the revolution that was coming. The reality from her perspective was much different. She had made a huge mistake. "I really made a mess of things this time," she told a friend in July 2014. Greene immediately returned as it dawned upon her how horrifying this part of the world had become. How she managed to escape is difficult to tell, but I'd imagine leaving IS after you had just betrayed the FBI is a lot more difficult than joining them. She returned to the US, cooperated with the authorities, and took a 2-year prison sentence as a slap on the wrist. Not many people come back from Syria alive, and not many people get a 2-year sentence for something this grave. While al-Almani getting the upper hand on the FBI, the backlash against IS in the latter half of 2015 was quite severe. In October 2015, IS were badly hit by NATO forces, and al-Almani was reportedly killed. Elisa Smith, a Defense Department spokeswoman, said in an email, "I can confirm that an October 16th airstrike in Raqqa killed Dennis Cuthbert." IS continued to release videos of al-Almani. He made no mention of the airstrikes, so it was presumed that he was dead and they were pretending that he was alive. But rumors began to spread that, in fact, he was still alive. And in 2016, the Pentagon refuted their earlier claims. Al-Almani was still among us. This period would prove devastating for Europe and North America. Attacks occurred in Paris, London, Manchester, Orlando, Florida, Brussels, and Istanbul, all involving young men claiming affiliation to IS. In al-Almani's native Germany, a truck drove into the Breitscheidplatz Christmas market and killed 12 civilians. Someone had taken his words of advice and made an attack on German soil. And IS were treating its territory like an actual country. Away from the wars and violent prophecies, they were also willing to do the administration required to set up a country. They were collecting taxes so garbage would be collected. They were printing out birth and marriage certificates. Families were also receiving child benefits. For people living previously without any law or order, to some of them, their new society was an improvement. With al-Almani's survival, though, he had humiliated the West once again. The mistake couldn't have worked better for IS propaganda, whose fundamental claim was that the West was lying to them all the time. And when they said he was dead, and he came up alive, that didn't help their case. However, IS were simply aggravating too many people. An attack in St. Petersburg now meant that it wasn't just NATO countries who were looking to fight back, but Russia too. Putin and Barack Obama were both united in their hatred of this group. Similarly, Turkey and the Kurds, who were often at odds with one another, both wanted to get rid of IS. Everyone wanted them gone. And one of IS's biggest tactical mistakes was its attacks in the Muslim world. As well as high-profile attacks in London and Paris, it was targeting countries like Turkey, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia. Its attack on the holy city of Medina was particularly damning evidence that these people were indiscriminate. The young men they were trying to radicalize would think twice now. The militant group faced attacks from all sides. Separate coalitions led by the US, France, Russia, and the Gulf states were all waging war against them. And by December 2017, IS had lost 95% of the territory it once held. Al-Almani was finding his country shrinking and shrinking bit by bit. Daniela Greene, meanwhile, was now out of prison and living a quiet life as a hotel worker. And on January 17, 2018, Al-Almani clashed with anti-IS forces, and the final days of IS would also be his final days. He was killed, and it was for real this time. A year later, in March 2019, IS lost its final territory. It was all over. But it was a new beginning for Daniela Greene, who is still among us, with likely a new name and identity.